And if we Americans are to accept hatred, all right, and if Jimmy Kimmel had his way, he would destroy, and I don't mean that literally, but he'd celebrate if something bad happened to Trump or Trump was thrown out or any of that. So I just think that goes beyond.
You mean like when Trump said that? You mean like when the president says he's happy that Mueller's dead? Like that kind of thing?
Okay,
you think he'd say that if the president died?
That was an unfortunate remark.
Here we have Chris Cuomo and Bill O'Reilly going head-to-head on media bias, free speech, and political double standards. And I want to share my honest take on what unfolds here, because this one genuinely stopped me cold. Underneath all the Kimmel noise, this debate is really about whether the rules apply to everybody or just the people you hate. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to know where you stand on this topic. All right, let's get into it.
So, tell me why the Kimmel thing makes sense.
Well, first of all, you didn't define it accurately. It's not about jokes. It's about hatred. So here you have a guy who, day in and day out, hates the president and the office of the presidency, in my opinion. And if the situation were reversed, if there were a right-wing commentator doing what Kimmel does, he would have been off the air eons ago. Disney would have never tolerated that. If you can imagine Barack Obama getting hated on every single day, that would never happen in a million years. The only reason Kimmel's there, for your audience to understand, is that Disney's been threatened by CIA and the other talent agencies that if you do anything to Jim, you're not going to get our personnel, writers and actors and things like that. And so Jim has got this layer of protection. But when Kimmel made the remark about MAGA being somewhat responsible for the assassination of Charlie Kirk, you'll remember that, I cut Kimmel some slack. I say, people make mistakes, and then you do commentary, and if you want to call it satire every night, you're going to get into waters sometimes that are difficult to get out of, so I'm not going to call for any sanctions against Kimmel. I believe I said that on this program, and I was wrong. Absolutely wrong. Because Kimmel has demonstrated to anybody who watches him that he hates. This is hate speech. It's not funny. It's not satire. There's no social redeeming quality to demeaning, whenever he can, the president and now the first lady. So that's how I would define it. You would define it as a bunch of jokes. I don't see it that way. So we have a gentleman's disagreement.
Well, we don't, because you have a right to your opinion. So do mine. So do I. But there's a lot of case law. See, that's what a lawyer like me looks at. And there is nothing approaching the standard that you want to apply. Of course you don't. Of course you don't. I don't think that's the problem.
No, I don't think that he should be subject to legal proceedings, Cuomo. So why are you putting words in my mouth?
What do you call an FCC? What do you call an FCC review of the license of the stations? What do you call that? It's not legal?
What I call an FCC review, FCC review is an FCC review.
And that's called a legal operation of the U.S. government. What are you talking about? They're legal proceedings. They take years. They take years of legal process, Bill. You got to do the research, pal. This is a nuisance.
The first step is an investigation, which is where we are now. Okay, they're looking at policies by Disney and others that may violate federal law. That's what they're doing now. Okay, nobody's been indicted.
We only know about
handcuffs,
8 Disney stations
around anybody's house.
So here's what just happened. O'Reilly comes out swinging. Jimmy Kimmel is a hater. Disney protects him because of the talent agencies. He should face an FCC review. That sounds like a real argument until Cuomo does something simple. He asks what an FCC review actually is. And O'Reilly stumbles. He says it's not legal proceedings, then 2 sentences later describes legal proceedings. That right there is the tell. He's making a serious accusation without doing the serious homework. And what comes next proves it.
Well, you don't have to be cuffed to have it be legal. right? I mean, you could get audited. That's a legal process also. Go ahead.
Okay. Look, I'm not interested in being in the weeds here, okay? I don't have a law degree, and I applaud yours. But I'm telling you, the man's a hater. And on any other scale, if he were not an avowed leftist, he would be off the air.
Greg Gutfeld's not off the air, and he's a toxic little troll that goes after every Democrat he can and other members of the media. And he's mean and hateful.
So I'm not
funny either, in my opinion.
Greg Gutfeld. I'm not justifying Greg Gutfeld because I don't use that technique of justifying bad behavior by pointing to other bad behavior. Now, you may think Mr. Gutfeld is a troll or whatever you said. He probably wears a hoodie, okay? And that's up to Fox to deal with him. Do I think it's right? I think that Gutfeld is a entertainer who seizes upon battering the left. I don't see him in the same category as Jimmy Kimmel. Perhaps I'm wrong.
Also, let me be very clear. I don't think Greg Gutfeld should lose his job. I think he should be able to do what he does and do his damnedest at it every night. Just like Kimmel.
Maybe we could have another show,
just like me. I fear the slippery slope.
Maybe we should have another show for. Okay, I don't know about any slippery slopes, Cuomo, but maybe we should have another show for Mr. Gutfeld, the troll show. Okay, maybe we can have that. I don't know. I don't even know what the troll is. I think it's a little thing in Denmark that goes around barking at you.
Look it up and you'll see a picture of Gutfeld.
Of this. Okay, I guess you don't like him.
Go ahead.
The seriousness.
I don't like him. I don't like that technique. I don't like that invective. I don't know the guy. I don't know him to like him or dislike him. I wish him well, and I want him to be able to do what he does. I believe in freedom of speech. You got to tolerate what you don't like. This president doesn't seem to like that standard.
I'm glad you're troll friendly, but this isn't about anything other than hate. Okay, that's what this is about. And if we Americans are to accept hatred, all right, and if Jimmy Kimmel had his way, he would destroy, and I don't mean that literally, but he'd celebrate if something bad happened to Trump or Trump was thrown out or any of that. So I just think that goes beyond.
You mean like when Trump said that? You mean like when the president says he's happy that Mueller's dead? Like that kind of thing?
Okay,
you think he'd say that if the president died?
That was an unfortunate remark.
Now watch what happens when Cuomo brings up Greg Gutfeld. O'Reilly says Gutfeld's a troll, his word, not Cuomo's, but then says he shouldn't lose his job. Fine, okay, I'll give him that one. Except he just made Cuomo's exact argument for him. And then, this is the moment. O'Reilly says Kimmel would celebrate if something bad happened to Trump. Cuomo hits back immediately. You mean like when the president said he was happy Mueller was dead? O'Reilly calls that an unfortunate remark. Same behavior, two completely different verdicts. Keep watching.
But once again, you're making a moral equivalency of a man who was battered by the phony Russian collusion, impeached twice, under daily hate speech by the media, which despises him. You're making a moral equivalency to Jimmy Kimmel. And there isn't one. Now, do I justify the Mueller comment? I do not. I don't. Okay, for me, but you have me on to give my opinion, Cuomo. Okay?
Exclusively.
So I don't justify.
I want your opinion on something else. I got it. I'm just saying it's just a different standard. Trump doesn't live up to his own standard. That's the thing. That's called hypocrisy. It's not moral relativism. Please make your point. And I want to ask you about something else. So go ahead.
Okay, I already forgot what my point is. I'm still thinking about the hoodie.
I'm going to send you one. It's going to say "Free Asian," and then on the back it's going to say "But I love Trump."
Just have your picture on it. That's all I want.
then you'll really be a target. Adam Smith was probing the topic of the nuclear enrichment with the Secretary of War. I want you to listen to a piece of it. Give me your take, please.
So they haven't broken yet. Okay, we haven't gotten there yet for all of the...
Well, their nuclear facilities have been obliterated. Underground, they're buried, and we're watching them 24/7. So we know where any nuclear material
reclaiming
might be.
my time for a quick second here. We had to start this war, you just said, 60 days ago, because the nuclear weapon was an imminent threat. Now you're saying that it was completely obliterated?
They had not given up their nuclear ambitions, and they had a conventional shield of thousands of...
So Operation Midnight Hammer accomplished nothing of substance. It left us at exactly the same place we were before.
You think that answer
So I take my
gets him on
analysis
borrowed
on
time?
this from... I take my analysis from this. I don't know about Hegseth. You know, it wasn't my choice. I didn't think that... knowing President Trump the way I do, I didn't think that was the right situation there, just because of experience. But I take my information about this from the IAEA based in Austria, and I had him on my program. This guy is second in command. He says, look, we bombed the hell out of them last July and did severe damage to their nuclear ambitions. However, they had in other places in the country enriched uranium, and they pivoted right over to that to continue their pursuit of a nuclear weapon. That makes perfect sense to me, Cuomo. Does it not to you?
I think that their ambitions are clear. They would love to have a nuclear weapon. I think the mistake, as we've gone over before, is that predicating the need for imminent military action unilaterally on the basis of the emergency that they were weeks away from having a nuclear weapon is a false premise.
Here's the thing. The whole debate between Cuomo and O'Reilly collapses down to one moment, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. O'Reilly spends the first half of this conversation making the case that Jimmy Kimmel should face consequences, FCC reviews, potential sanctions, because Kimmel would, in his words, celebrate if something bad happened to Trump. That is his standard. Public figures who express what he calls hatred toward the president deserve accountability. That is the line O'Reilly draws. Then Cuomo asks one question. He says, "You mean like when the president says he's happy that Mueller's dead? Like that kind of thing?" And O'Reilly's answer, his actual answer, is that was an unfortunate remark. Not hatred, not something that should trigger a review, not something worthy of consequences, an unfortunate remark. That right there is the whole ballgame. O'Reilly just applied two completely different standards to identical behavior and expected nobody to notice. Cuomo noticed, and now you have. What makes this even sharper is that O'Reilly tries to get out of it by calling it a moral equivalency. Says you can't compare what Kimmel does to Trump because Trump was battered by phony Russian collusion and impeached twice under daily hate speech. That is not a counter-argument. That is a feelings explanation. You do not get to exempt someone from your own rule because you feel like they had it harder. That is not how principles work. That is how tribalism works. And O'Reilly, a guy who built a career on demanding consistency from politicians, just walked straight into his own argument and let the door hit him on the way out. Then the conversation shifts to Iran and Operation Midnight Hammer, and this is where it gets genuinely important, not just as debate theater, but as something that matters. O'Reilly says he gets his information from the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, and that their second-in-command told him directly, "We did severe damage to Iran's nuclear ambitions, but they had enriched uranium in other locations and pivoted to continue the pursuit." I'll give him that. That's a real source. That's credible. That deserves credit. But Cuomo's answer cuts through it anyway. He says the core problem isn't whether Iran has nuclear ambitions. Everyone agrees they do. The problem is that the justification for the strike was that Iran was weeks away from having a weapon. That was the emergency. That was the imminent threat that made unilateral military action necessary. And if the strike didn't eliminate that threat, then the premise the entire operation was sold on was false. You cannot say we had to act right now because they were weeks away, and then say, well, they still have the material and the ambition. Those two things together do not add up to mission accomplished. They add up to a problem that is still very much alive and a justification that did not hold. Think about what that actually means for a second, because this is not abstract. This is the pattern that led to Iraq in 2003. The IAEA has been consistent. Nuclear enrichment capability and an actual deployable weapon are not the same threshold. The intelligence community knows that. That is standard doctrine. And when political leaders collapse that distinction to justify military action, we have seen exactly what happens next, and we are all still paying for it. Cuomo had the stronger argument in this debate, not because he was louder or more polished, because he had the actual receipts. He caught O'Reilly applying one rule to Kimmel and a different rule to Trump's identical behavior, using O'Reilly's own words to do it. And on Iran, he identified the gap between the stated justification and the actual outcome, without being dramatic about it, just clean, direct logic. O'Reilly is not a stupid man. He knows what he did when Trump's Mueller comment came up. He called it unfortunate and moved on as fast as he could. That is not an argument. That is a retreat. So here is the question I want to leave you with, and I want you to actually think about it before you answer in the comments. If you believe Jimmy Kimmel should face government review for celebrating bad news about a president, do you believe the same standard should apply to that president when he celebrates the death of a political opponent? Yes or no? Because you cannot have it both ways. That is the whole point of having a standard in the first place.